African startups raised about $1.44 billion in the first half of 2026 alone. The headline celebrated, the tweet went out, the ecosystem patted itself on the back. While everyone was celebrating the money, something else was happening. Flutterwave, Africa's most valuable startup, was breached again. Billions of nairas were moved illicitly through accounts before everyone noticed. And nobody connected these two stories. But today we are going to connect them, because here is the question that will define this decade for African tech. Who is watching security, or who is watching the cyberspace? Now, let's decode what that 1.44 billion actually tells us. The numbers of companies getting funded dropped drastically. Fewer startups, bigger checks. What that actually means is the money is concentrating at the top. A handful of companies, Spyro, an e-mobility company, Flutterwave, MNT Harlan, they soaked up a massive share of the total amount of the money that was raised. The typical founder is raising far less than they would have a year ago. But the biggest shift is the type of money. Debt financing, loans, credit facilities, they nearly triple as a share of the funding. So this is not vendor capital betting on big ideas. This is lenders writing loans against predictable cash flows. Now, debt is not inherently bad, Debt is not bad. A lot of us do have debt. A lot of companies do have debt. But here's what debt does to incentives. Debt must be repaid. And as we all know, repaying debt is painful. It creates pressure to generate revenue quickly. And when every dollar goes to growth, to repayment, or to staying alive, security becomes the thing you will deal with later. That is the thing. When you are more concentrating on trying to stay growth, you try to make profit without thinking about security. Because think about it this way. If a company like Flutterwave invests $3 million in their cybersecurity department, every year there is not going to be any revenue that is going to be written in the books that came out from that department. You know why? They are only going to have an expense. Money to pay employees, money to pay for tools, money to pay for innovative solutions, and all that. The work of that department is probably hardly going to be recognized, because if they are doing their job, Flutterwave is not going to get any attack. In a year, they may not get an attack. So no attack happens. It looks like the department is not doing anything. But once the department is not there and an attack happens, company lose 30 million. The company lose 6 million. And this happened year after year. That's when you know that that particular department was generating revenue, the unseen security revenue. So as we have spoken, the money is flowing. Companies are getting funding, but so are the attacks. And the gaps between those two things, that is where the story lives. In the early part of this year, Flutterwave, this is a company that is processing billions of dollars in transactions across more than 30 African countries. It was breached. Billions of nairas moved illicitly to other accounts. The full extent of this breach is unclear. But the thing is, this was not the first time they are getting breached, because in 2023, they experienced two separate breaches in quick succession. One involved over $4 million, the other roughly about $6.3 million. The company has denied some of these claims and some of these reports. They have stated that no customer funds were moved, no customer lost their funds. Even with them saying that, you have to step back and look at the pattern. A financial technology company handling payments across the entire continent has now been targeted at least 3 times in 3 years. And the conversation simply moves on. This is not about Flutterwave, This is about what Flutterwave represents. Because look, when a financial technology company that is processing payments for millions of people gets breached, what is actually at stake? It could be your identification documents. It could be your entire financial footprint. These things sold and traded before you even know that they were missing, even though the company denies that no customer information was compromised or that the confidentiality of customer information still remain intact. I mean, you can take that for what you want to. With an advance in technology, do you really need to see logs showing that someone tried to exploit your data before you believe that it was taken out? Do you really have to see something in your data loss prevention tools showing that someone tried to export data or take data out before you think that they did? But let's keep going. So widen your lens right now, because Africa remains one of the most attacked regions on the planet in terms of cyber incidents. Global cybercrime cost the world over $10 trillion last year. 10 trillion last year on global cybercrime. For African businesses specifically, cybersecurity has become the #1 risk concern. Think about every startup that just raised money in the first half of 2026. Health technology companies holding patients' records. Logistic platforms tracking supply chains. AI companies training on sensitive data sets. Clean energy startups connected to national infrastructure. Each one is a door. And right now, most of those doors are unlocked. So the question is really not whether these companies will be attacked. The question is, what happens when they are? So let's walk through a scenario that's not hypothetical. An early stage financial technology raises a couple of $1 million. They build payment products. They scale to have 1 million users across the countries in the continent. They store KYC data, national identity cards numbers, bank verification numbers, passport scans, and biometrics of their customers. Then they get breached, not because they were targeted by some sophisticated state actor, but because they are running on default cloud configurations. No hardening of the systems at all. No penetration testing activities in their environment. No dedicated cybersecurity or information security team at all. But here is what happens next. If a company is operating in a country without data protection laws and 10 African nations still have none, there is no legal obligation to tell anyone, so the company stays quiet, the company moves on. But the data does not. That is the thing. The data that was breached, the customer's information, it doesn't. It is sold. And if you have watched our previous video on data privacy and data security, you would know this. If you haven't, you can go to our channel and check more about that video. But what happens is that data is sold. That data is used for fraudulent bank account activities. They can use it to apply for loans. They can use it to build synthetic identities. And the victims of these are regular people who trusted these digital services. And they don't know that their information is already being sold online. But you know when they will discover? Maybe a month later, maybe years later. And when they notice this, they may not know what happened, how their data end up online, because some company that they used was hacked and they were never told. Or they were told there was no compromise to their data. Now multiply that across every funded startup that is not investing in security. The health technology companies, the logistic platforms, the AI companies. So the incentive structure works against information security. For any early stage African startup, every dollar goes to growth, user acquisition, market expansion, product development. Cybersecurity does not generate revenue, like we said earlier. It does not. It does not show up in the pitch deck. When we have these big business people, the CEOs sitting on the table and looking at the presentation deck from their customer service team, customer success team, from their marketing team, security is not part of that deck. It does not impress investors until there is a breach. Then security is the only thing that matters. But by then, the damage is already done. It's already done. The trust is already gone. The World Economic Forum confirms what you would expect. Cyber-enabled fraud and phishing are climbing rapidly. And oh yes, you would bet that phishing is climbing. With AI now everywhere, attackers can pretty much craft phishing emails or phishing links that it would be hard for you, even a professional, to detect. So the gap between large organizations with dedicated security teams and startups with no security budget is really widening. So what that means is the companies that are raising the most amount of money are not necessarily the ones that are building the most security. And the companies with the most to lose, the early stage startups with everything riding on user trust, are the least prepared. So where does this leave us? The shift from equity to debt is not the problem. It's what debt does to your priorities that should worry us. When you owe money, you chase revenue. Security does not generate any revenue. We have said this several times today. The regulatory practices are improving, but they are uneven. Most African countries now have data protection laws. They are written in books, but a law on paper does not protect data. And enforcement across the continent is inconsistent at best. However, there is some movement. MasterCard launched an African Cybersecurity Center of Excellence just a month ago or so, offering free risk assessment to organizations. That is a start, but will that solve every problem? Can that alone do it? not when the attack surface is expanding at the pace that it is right now. So here is what I think. African startups raising serious capital should be expected to demonstrate at a minimum security postures, basic penetration testing activities, an incident response plan, encryption standards that actually protect user data, because protecting these is also protecting your investment. Investors should really treat information security as a diligence item, not just something that we can figure out after a series of other items that have been presented to us. And the 10 African nations without data protection laws need to really pass some laws to protect the data. At least if they don't care about the companies or the organizations, they should care about their citizens. So $1.44 billion is a milestone for African tech. It says global capital still believes in the continent and in the continent's digital future. But money does not build trust. Trust is built when users know that their data is protected, their money is safe, and that the companies handling both are held accountable. So think about it that way. So African tech stories is no longer just about whether startups can raise money. It is about whether they can protect what they build. So money is on the table, attacks sit on the other side of the table. The gap between them, that is where the real story is. If you are building a startup, if you are investing in one, if you are using one, you should start asking about security. Not after the breach, because after the breach, the damage could be done. Start asking before it is. Were you aware that African organizations face more cyber attacks per week than any other region in the world? So if you listen to this and you like it, please follow us, subscribe, like, comment, and share to your friends and family members so that they can also learn. But until then, safeguard your data, and for organizations, get a cybersecurity team, and we'll see you in another episode of SecureAfric. Thank you.